providers on board and at 8 schools within LAUSD. And so the 8 schools that we are working with are, there's 3 high schools, which are Fremont, Washington, and Crenshaw High Schools. And there are 3 middle schools, which are Audubon, Obama, and Horace Mann. And there are 2 elementary schools, which are Hillcrest and Western Avenue Elementary Schools. So those are the 8 schools in this target that we're targeting for this project. More specifically, we're looking to bring on, for this round of funding, 8 providers with a total of 4 at each school. And we're focusing on, in this first round, Washington Prep High School and Fremont High School. So we're looking at 4 providers each, and pretty much an even distribution between physical activity and nutrition. So in the second paragraph there, under Reach Partners in Health Project, if you look in the second sentence, it says the project addresses 3 significant policy initiatives in the prevention and management of chronic diseases. One is increasing nutrition and physical activity participation and resources in and external to public schools. And then we have a couple of more, developing and adopting clinical protocols to improve screening and management of obesity and hypertension. And then there's updating the local community plans. So the first one is the one that we're targeting with this RFP, increasing nutrition and physical activity participation, resources in the school and external to public schools. Basically, we want to target the kids in the school and the external community around the school. One of the key things I think that's important to keep in mind is that numbers matter, particularly with this particular grant, or the term REACH is important because one of the key elements for this grant is to attract or engage as many people as we can. So as you're preparing your proposal, think about strategies that will allow you to access as many people as you can within the framework of your project. The next section, grant project, one of the key things I think that is important is that we're looking for organizations with a history of working in schools and with culturally diverse communities. So we're looking for organizations that are familiar with working with African American and Latino communities and with communities of underserved communities or low-income communities as well. The target area that you should focus on, depending on the school you plan to work in, is a half-mile radius from the school. So we're looking at the community that exists within a half-mile radius of the school. So if you're thinking about Washington Prep High School, think about how you would attract the community that lives within a half-mile radius of the school, along with the students at the school. Okay, let's go on to service categories. So I think it's important that we're really clear on how to complete this application. So if you look under the service category, it says that interested organizations will propose a project in one of the following categories. So there's 2 categories. One is nutrition, and the second one is physical activity. I think it's important it states that only one category may be selected for the proposal, and if chosen, you will be funded at a rate within the stated funding range. So you can only use your proposal to apply for one category. So So in other words, you cannot use one proposal to apply for both nutrition and physical activity. They would have to be separate applications. However, it says, please note that a separate complete proposal must be submitted for each category. Then it says, however, you may apply to provide services in the same category for more than one school using the same completed proposal. So if you wanted to be considered, let's say you're applying for a physical activity grant, and you want to be considered for both Washington and Fremont, you could use the same application for both within that category. So that's the whole point there. Okay, let's go to each specific category. Under nutrition, there's a point here that I want everyone to be aware of. In the first sentence, it says projects shall include the implementation of strategies to increase access to healthy food and or nutrition education, to promote and encourage healthier eating among students, their family members, and school area community members. I think that word "and" is important because it's one of the areas that we're trying to encourage is for people not only to have access to healthier options, but to actually eat the food. You know, if the fresh fruit and vegetables are available, but no one is eating them, then we're not being effective. So we're going to look for applications that have a strategy that encourages the consumption of food, of the healthy food options as well. And then below, we've given you some options. These are just ideas. You're not limited to any of these ideas, but we just wanted to perhaps jumpstart your thinking around each category. The last paragraph in this category, A, it says project strategies must be rooted in evidence-based practices, which are aligned with federal nutritional guidelines. So the key point here is that as a CDC-funded project, we are obligated to use strategies that have a proven track record or that are evidence-based, or you may have heard the term best practices. They use best practices. So we're going to encourage our providers to do the same, have the same standards. And that is to whatever project you design, hopefully you have some evidence to support that it works. And that's all this paragraph is getting at, that you, whatever you design as a project, you have some evidence to support its effectiveness. And that helps us support you in doing your work. So we've provided a couple of sources for you to consider in terms of evidence-based practices. And so the same holds true for physical activity. We're looking for projects that implement physical activity or physical education projects that will increase physical activity access and promote participation in physical activity among students, their family members, and school area community members. So we not only want to offer more physical activity resources, but we also want people to participate in the resources that we're offering. Because again, if we're offering the resources and no one is there to, or no one participates, we're not being effective. So as part of your strategy, you should also have some or provide some incentives perhaps, or some community outreach strategies to attract people to your particular program. And again, we've provided some options as ideas, but you're not limited to these options. Also, we want the physical activity component to also be rooted in evidence-based practices or best practices for your project idea, essentially to give evidence that what you plan to do is effective. Okay, so let's go on to the next section, which is the selection criteria. So grant recipients will be selected using a competitive RFP, and we're looking for high impact strategies. I think we sort of made that clear. So let's go down to some of the bullet points. The following criteria used in the selection process. We're looking for organizations with some track record of providing comparable resources in the profiled area and or with target population. So we're looking for organizations who have a track record of working in similar communities. And second bullet is an important one. It says demonstrated ability to sustain projects beyond contract period. This is really key because we want to support you in gaining a foothold into the community and providing you with some startup funding, but we're really looking for organizations who have a longer-term commitment or vision for their business in the community. So we want you to consider some sustainability strategies to support your work moving beyond the funding period. So certain things that you may want to consider are pursuing additional grants. You may have or create some contract opportunities for yourself. You may charge low fees for particular services. You may want to develop or implement a train-the-trainer strategy as a component to your work. So think about ways to keep your project or sustain your project beyond the contract period. The next bullet says capacity to implement evidence-based. I think we've talked about that. Again, you want some evidence to support what you plan to do. The next bullet talks about ability to implement innovative strategies with full justification connected to project outcome measures. So I just want to be clear or clarify what we mean by innovative strategies, because we're talking about, I was just talking about evidence-based practices, and now we're talking about innovative practices. So I just want to make this clear. We want the foundation of the project to be rooted in evidence-based, but there are opportunities, or there may be opportunities for some innovation that incorporates evidence-based practices. For example, you may have some innovative partnerships or collaborations that support your work. So think about innovation in that way. Okay? If you have a project that is new and actually no one else is doing but is effective, that's fine. You still should apply, but provide us with evidence of the effectiveness of your project. We would need to see some evidence of the effectiveness of your project. The next point I think is an important point, that is leveraging of other resources for the successful implementation of proposed strategies. This is an important bullet because we really want you to think about these dollars as startup dollars, or dollars to use as a catalyst for a larger impact. So some of the strategies you could use to consider when it comes to leveraging your resources would be, of course, partnerships. Maybe partnering with another organization or a government agency such as the Department of Public Health or even LAUSD. You may want to recruit some volunteers. Volunteers are a clear way of demonstrating added value to your project. There may be some collaborations that you want to create in order to support the implementation of your project. So these are just a few ideas to consider when developing your project. So the project grant period is from the fall 2013 to fall 2014. And so it's over 3 consecutive school calendar semesters. Excuse us. We're expecting to fund this project over 3 consecutive semesters, as I was saying, from the fall, which is now, through the fall of 2014. Now, in the summer of 2014, we're not expecting you to provide services because we are not clear whether or not you would have access to the campus or not. So you should plan for just fall 2013, spring 2014, and fall 2014. Okay, the next area is the scope of work. And so if we could scroll up to the scope of work, we'll cover this section. Okay, so the scope of work is really describes what you're going to do and how you plan to achieve your goals. So it says grant recipients are directly responsible for implementing evidence-based, I would say, and innovative strategies designed to reduce rates of hypertension and obesity in the African American and Latino communities. So let's look at the bullet points. Elements of grant recipients' overall scope of work include: you need a implementation plan, a negotiation of a use of space agreement with LAUSD. This is important because we are charged with getting you on board this semester, and we're going to be working with LAUSD to help expedite your joint use or shared use agreement with LAUSD. And part of our attachment for this application, you'll find that there's a license agreement, LAUSD license agreement that we'll talk about a little bit. And we want you to go ahead and complete that so that we'll have all the information we need, and LAUSD can pre-screen that, which will help you come on board quickly. Also, we'll be looking for organizations who already have a relationship with LAUSD, and that will be to your advantage because we know that you have already been through the process, and it should be easy to get you approved. Okay. We're looking at collaboration. You'll need to collaborate with, well, before I get to that one bullet, you need to develop an implementation of a communication strategy for participant outreach. Basically, you need an outreach strategy. How are you going to let the community know about your services when you come on board? Another key element will be your collaboration with our evaluators to identify, collect, and submit utilization data. So a big part of any grant, as I'm sure many of you know, is the reporting of data, collecting and reporting data. So we have USC, a USC evaluation team who will be working with us and you to gather this information. So we'll just need your support and participation in helping to gather the data that we need. We will provide the instruments for you to use, and we just need your support in working with your participants to gather that information. Identification, next bullet point is identification and assignment to sufficient qualified staff to carry out project activities. We're just looking for staff with experience and the needed basic qualifications to do the kind of work that you are proposing for them to do. And then the allocation of funding, development of the sustainability plan, which we discussed, Then there will be some quarterly progress reports to CAC and some regular meetings. So we're looking at quarterly meetings. It may be more frequent than that, but at this point we're looking at quarterly meetings. Okay, the next section is the method of accountability and how the project how it's going to be monitored. I think it's pretty straightforward. So we'll move on to the next section, which is eligibility and project requirements. And I think there's a point here that we want to make very clear, and that is this RFP is designed to identify and support new projects that reduce disparities in obesity rates and hypertension. So what does that word new mean? That basically means if you're already providing services at Fremont and you want to put in an application for providing services at Fremont, you cannot use or put in an application for what you are currently doing. It would have to be a new project, a new idea, because we want to add resources with this particular funding opportunity. So that's basically what we're saying when we state new projects. It doesn't necessarily have to be a new project for your organization. If you are providing a project at maybe Los Angeles High School and you want to apply to use that particular project or fund that particular project at Washington or Fremont, you are welcome to do so. Okay, who can apply? I think it says California for-profit or nonprofit organizations that have been in business for more than 2 years in LA County. And then there's a few other bullets here that I think are pretty straightforward. Again, I just want to emphasize the point that because of the timeline we're under, we're really looking for organizations who either have or can easily get through the shared use agreement process with LAUSD. Okay, preferences. Let's see, and the next bullet: organizations with culturally and age-appropriate, evidence-based, and/or innovative projects that serve multi-generations. So we're looking at student ages 5 through 17 and adults 18 and older. Okay, so under preferences, we will be given to organizations. I think it's pretty clear. This last bullet point: maintains a business office within the geographical boundaries where the services will be provided. If you're not in that area, we still encourage you to apply because we'll consider more the quality of your application. Okay, and then proposers must possess. I think one of the key things is you must have insurance, your liability insurance, and on the next page you can't have any outstanding federal tax liability or state or city liabilities. Because what we don't want to do is to award you the funding and perhaps it gets garnished by the federal government or the state. Okay, so let's go to the funding and grant period. And this part of the RFP, I will turn over to our finance director, Shane.
So good afternoon, everyone. This is really pretty straightforward, but it warrants repeating. The acceptable funding range per award is $25,000 to $35,000. The maximum award is $35,000. Our responses to the RFP that request funds in excess of $35,000 will be reviewed. However, the amount over the $35,000 would not be awarded. So understand that we are only going to be awarding between $25,000 and $35,000 per contract. So please make sure that you maximize that funding to your advantage. Use of funds. The CDC has established rules regarding the appropriate use of this funding. And as such, we have provided you these restrictions based upon the CDC guidance. Some of them probably perhaps won't make too much sense to you, but in the context of the additional work that we're doing through the REACH demonstration program, these restrictions are applicable. So you may not use the funds for any type of research. You may not use the funds for clinical care. You may not use the funds to provide student fees, scholarships, or to do any type of construction. Recipients may only expend funds for reasonable program purposes. These generally include personnel, travel, supplies, etc. Generally speaking, you may not use the funding for the purchase of furniture or equipment. However, under this RFP, if you are going to be, let's say you're going to be doing a physical activity, like a Zumba class or a yoga class, and you would like to procure yoga mats for the use during that class, that would be an allowable equipment cost. However, you must specify that that is what the funds are going to be used for in your budget, as well as your budget narrative justification. And when we get to those two documents, I'll explain a little bit more regarding that. The next item is very, very important. The applicant, or lead applicant, if you are applying as a collaborative effort, must complete a substantial portion of the scope of work activities that you outline in your proposal. In other words, what the CDC does not want to see happen is we award a contract to you, and all of the work under that contract you then award to another entity to complete. That would not be allowable. A substantial portion or a substantial role in carrying out the project objectives is that the lead agency or the lead individual must complete more than half of the activities. And then lastly, reimbursement of pre-award costs are not allowable. So any cost in the development of your proposal to us, any cost related to any item that, for instance, if you hire a grant writer or if you have to purchase research materials to put your proposal together, those are not eligible for reimbursement. Reimbursement is the only costs eligible for reimbursement are those costs that are incurred from the date of the contract through the entire contract period.
Okay, thank you, Shane. So now let's go through quickly. We're going to move forward with the instructions for submission, and then we'll bring Shane back to discuss the budget template. So the application is pretty straightforward regarding how we want it structured, with the margins 1 inch top, bottom, right, left, the font, and single space. And we also have a checklist of items for your convenience, because there are several items you need to gather. And so we just wanted to make it convenient for you to complete the application. Some of the items I think will cover, let's see. Let's go to the, can we do the project narrative description? We have that. We have that. Let's see. What about scope of work?
We want the scope of work and attachment?
Yeah. Okay, so the scope of work is, hopefully many of you have used or have developed a scope of work and timeline. Basically, this is a form that we want you to complete to sort of help you develop your implementation and your describe how you're going to do your outreach and some project monitoring. Okay, so just use this as a template for helping you to create your scope of work. Let's see. We have, why don't we go to the budget justification. Let's spend some time with that. And maybe, Shane, you can talk about the budget justification and then go to the budget preparation, the template for the budget.
Okay, actually, I'm gonna reverse that order. I'm gonna first do the budget template, which is an Excel document, and then I will translate that information into the budget narrative justification document. So on your screen is the Excel document that you will be using to compose your budget. You'll see that we have preloaded it with some general line items. You may feel free to edit those line items. Additional line items that perhaps you have a particular expense that is not covered in one of these categories. What we do ask is, for the purpose of preserving the template, if you do not, for instance, have any expenses for postage, just indicate that by being zeros, you need not delete that line. If there are other costs that aren't personnel or benefits related, or that does not fit in one of these pre-populated items, please use the other category where you see the 1, 2, and 3. You may also add additional spaces if you require to do so, but we'd like to keep those items under the other category. So how this spreadsheet works is pretty simple. This first column here is the request from CHC. This is the amount of funding for that particular line item that you would like CHC to fund under this award. In addition to that amount of funding, if you will be providing any type of in-kind contributions, for instance, let's say you have staff employee number 1 who is 100% of their time is on this project. However, you're only requesting from CHC to fund half of that, then the other half that is not being funded by CHC can be credited to you as an in-kind contribution. If your program has other sources of funding, such as another grant or contract with another governmental entity or a private foundation, you can indicate the amount of that funding in this column. We do not need to know the exact source of that contribution. So we're not looking for a list of, I have this contract with the city, I have this contract already with a foundation, and this is what they're funding. We just need to know the dollar amount. This next column, program income/fees. As Wiley mentioned to you earlier, there is allowable for you to charge a fee for some of the services or programs that you are proposing. Bear in mind, however, that we are working with an economically disadvantaged population, and as a result, if you are charging a fee or any related cost that's going to be passed on to the participant of the program, we ask that you bear in mind that some individuals may find that to be economically a struggle for them to be able to pay. So make sure that if you are going to be charging a fee, we ask that you keep that in mind and that your fee reflect an appropriate amount given that situation. And then finally, this last column is the total program budget, which includes your in-kind contribution, any other sources of funding, and any program income or fees that you are charging. The last item that I will indicate using this template is this line, indirect overhead expense. This is your general administration overhead. We do not require any substantial justification for this. However, we are limiting the amount that you can claim for indirect or overhead expenses to a maximum of 10% of your direct costs. So, as an example, if the total of your personnel and operating expenses is $1,000, the maximum that you can claim in indirect costs would be 10% of that, or $100. Those are generally to be used for administrative purposes, such as if you have to have a bookkeeper, or if you do some kind of audit at the end of the year, or there are general administrative costs that really aren't captured on any other line item. You do not need to itemize your indirect expenses for us because it is based on a flat percentage of direct costs. So that is the budget template, which would then be translated into your, if I can find it for just a moment, here we go, into your budget justification. So attachment B1 is the budget justification form. It has a couple of different components. We are asking you here other sources of funding. This is where, if, for instance, you had a contract with the City of Los Angeles, and that was another source of income that you're going to be combining with your proposal and your request from CHC, here you would just indicate what the funding source is. For instance, let's say it is City of Los Angeles CDBG, fiscal year 2013-14. And then the amount of that award, and let's say it's $5,000. Just indicate that here. As well, if you are charging fees for the service, we would like for you to itemize what those fees are by name and dollar amount. Use this table at the bottom to do so. If you require additional space, please feel free to add rows or use multiple sheets when responding on this document. In this section, we would like for you to provide us with a full justification of expenses. For personnel, that includes the name and position title for every position going to be funded, along with the percentage of time or the full-time equivalent for that position in the amount that you will be requesting funding for. As well, you would need to provide us with your calculation of that amount and a brief 2 to 3 sentences that gives us an explanation of what that person's or what that position's role in the project is. You will do this for every component of your budget, personnel, and every line item as far as your operating expenses. For instance, if you were going to be asking for rent and your rent was $100 a month, times 9 months, because let's say that was the duration of your contract, that would be $900 to support the operating environment for the project. So just a brief description of what the cost is for and how you derived the figure for the cost in that section. And that is the justification in a nutshell. It does kind of look like we may have some additional questions around the justification. So at the end of the webinar, when we get to our Q&A session, we'll answer those questions.
So perhaps you can, since you have the attention of the audience, go to the next 2 attachments.
Okay. Bear with us for just one moment. So now we're going to skip a little bit because we have the proposer's questionnaire, which is Exhibit 1, references, which is Exhibit 2, and then the LAUSD license application, which is Attachment C. Understand that all 3 of these documents are required to be submitted with your application. If you exclude any one of these documentation or any of these requirements, you will be penalized points in the scoring of your application. So this is what the Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 looks like. Very simple. You'll need to answer these questions to the best of your ability. Very important to understand this question number 5, DUNS number. If your organization or entity does not currently have a DUNS number, you will be required to apply for and receive one as a condition of your award under this RFP. If you do not have one presently, just please put on the line that you do not have one. And if you are awarded, we will work with you to ensure that you receive a DUNS number. A DUNS number is required for any entity that receives funding from the federal government. The funds that we are awarding under this RFP, because they come from the CDC, meets that requirement. And therefore, all entities would need to have a DUNS number within 60 days of being awarded under this RFP. If you are a nonprofit entity within the state of California, California Code of Regulations indicate that all nonprofits need to register with the California Registry of Charitable Trusts. And when you register, you're provided with a CT number. We do not need to see a verification of the registry. All we need is to have your CT number. If you are not a nonprofit organization, please simply write "not applicable" on the line provided. So the next page of this document is some acknowledgments. I won't go into detail because it's pretty straightforward. The important thing to understand is you must have a business office within the geographical boundaries of the city of Los Angeles County. Within the boundaries of Los Angeles County. I know that that may be a little confusing. We're looking for businesses operated within the county limits. In addition to that, no individual who is related to your proposed program can have been convicted of any felony criminal violation within the preceding 24 months. This is a federal requirement, and if you are not able to attest to that fact, please provide us a brief paragraph as to why that is, so that we can further discuss amongst ourselves and can give that its full weight of consideration. And finally, your entity must not have any unpaid federal tax liabilities. We will be verifying this information using the government website for the System of Award Management. This is also known as the Debarment Clause, which all federal contracts are required to include. If you have unpaid federal tax liability and your proposal is scored high enough to receive an award, as a condition of receiving that award, you will be required to first submit to us verification that the unpaid liability has been resolved. Quite simply, you'll need to sign this information here to attest to those items. Also provide your employer identification number here that's provided by the Internal Revenue Service. If you have a city or county business license number or tax certificate number, you'll indicate that on this line, along with either the city or county, and if it is City of Los Angeles, please indicate by saying City of Los Angeles or County of Los Angeles as appropriate on this line. And then finally, exhibit number 2 are your contractor references. We would like to have 3 references whom we can contact to verify, number 1, the information regarding your contract for services with that entity, and number 2, your performance in the course of providing those services. We will be contacting references as part of our RFP review process prior to announcement of any awards. So that's pretty straightforward. I think that covers those 3 items.
Now
we'll go to the LAUSD license application, which looks like this.
Okay, so this application we wanted to include primarily to fast track any provider who is approved or who scores high enough for moving forward with a contract. And we thought that if we get you to complete the application up front, that will save us time. As I mentioned earlier, we're working with LAUSD and alerting them that we have this this proposal, and that we are going to need to expedite the process. So we're going to do everything we can to reduce the time it takes to get you approved. So on the application, there are, first of all, there's some fees associated with the application. We will cover those application fees, so you will not need to worry about paying for those fees. The second part of, I think that's important, is if we go to page 6 on the application.
Of this document, or?
Yes. That's it.
That's it?
Yeah. And if we scroll down a little bit, it says, will additional custodial hours be required? If that's the case, there will probably be a fee associated with that. So we encourage you to contact LAUSD to get a sort of explain to them what you plan to do, and if there's any fees that are likely to be associated with that, find out what those fees and approximate cost for those fees, and include those fees with your budget, okay, so that those fees are incorporated into your line item. All right, and I think that if you have any questions, specific questions about the application, you can feel free to call LAUSD, or you can call myself at CHC, and I will give you my number. I think the contact information is on the application, but the number is 323-295-9372, extension 260. That's 323-295-9372, extension 260. You can also contact LAUSD, but do not turn this application in directly to LAUSD. We want you to complete it and turn it in with the other components of your application so that we can fast track it on your behalf. Okay, so with that, there's just a couple more items and then we'll wrap up and go into our Q&A section. If we could go back to the application on page 8, the RFP, and there's a box that I'm sure many of you are probably, scroll up, there you go. That last box there, the 2-minute media representation of proposed projects, we want you to upload that to YouTube. So one of the requirements by the CHC is for us to engage the community as part of our process. So one of the things we want to do is to share with the community your proposed idea, get some potential feedback about it from the community, and incorporate that in as part of our decision making. I think one thing that I want to be very clear, I don't want anybody to feel as though they have to be a Steven Spielberg or a Spike Lee to create some masterpiece. We're looking for something pretty straightforward and simple that would be attractive to a young audience or an adult audience. Okay, and so we're looking to have that by September 25th. And again, it's just part of the overall application process. I think the quality of your application will carry the most weight. Okay, so the final thing I think we have to discuss is just the proposal review process. You can scroll down a little bit. Just want to go through this fairly quickly. And it's basically in 4 phases. The first phase is that our staff here at CHC will receive all the applications and do a preliminary screening. And then once the application gets past that phase, it will go on to phase 2, with the proposals entering phase 2 will be reviewed by LAUSD for meeting minimum qualifications to work on the campus. And then phase 3 will be the community engaging or reviewing the leading applicants to get their level of interest, because we want the community to fully support what you're doing. And then phase 4 is the review committee will gather all this information and make final approval of proposals, and we will forward notices of award to selected organizations. Now, I think there's some important information to let you be aware of, that this is phase 1. We're looking to fund 8 applicants. As a total, we're looking to fund 25 applicants. So we still will have 17 applicants to fund in our next round. But I think it's important for you to be aware of, and I want to encourage you to participate in this round, because if your application is strong but it is not funded as part of the first 8, we will certainly give you consideration and perhaps roll your application into a phase 2 consideration. So, and we will let you know that as well. So please apply, and we wish you each the best of success. And so now we'll open up this session for the next 25, 27 minutes to answer questions that have been coming through.
So we have received a number of questions, and we do ask that you use the question feature on your screen to submit your questions, and we will respond to as many as we have within the time provided. So the first question that we have is, if we are already working on a campus providing after-school programming and have a contract, do we need to fill out the LAUSD paperwork?
I would think you do. For our purposes, you will need to, it should be very similar to what you already have completed, and you can probably use similar information, particularly if you're going to implement the same project but on a different site.
And if you do have a permit with LAUSD, it might be beneficial for you to include a copy of that documentation with your application, just so that we know that you already have that in place.
Yes, that would be very helpful, because again, we want to get providers on board as quickly as possible. So organizations that already have a relationship or have demonstrated that they've been through the process and have been approved, that will be a plus for that organization.
So the next question we have is food an allowable cost? In the context of, for instance, if you're going to be doing nutrition-based programming, yeah, I'm going to let Sadio answer this one.
Hi, so this is Sadia Woods, again, project coordinator on the school food and nutrition portion of this grant. We are allowing purchase of food as a means to achieve the goals of encouraging the consumption of fresh fruits and vegetables. So, for example, you can purchase food for cooking demonstrations and for tasting. You can purchase food for tasting as part of an overall nutrition education program. We will not be allowing the purchase of food for just general snacks and refreshments or for catering of events. So just use your best judgment as to, you know what your project is and whether or not, you know what your project is, and based on that explanation, whether or not you'd be able to purchase food. Water is acceptable as well.
Okay. So the next question is, where can we download the RFP?
The RFP is located on our website. And so if you go to www.chc-inc.org, you will find it on the home page. So again, that's www.chc, which stands for Community Health Councils, -inc, period, or .org, O-R-G.
And as you can see on your screen, right on our home page in the bottom portion, you will see the announcement of the RFP here. And this red word, application, download the application. If you click on that, you will be able to download the entire zip file that includes the RFP, all of the exhibits and attachments, and the required forms for you to complete.
And for those who may have joined the webinar a little late, we have extended the deadline from Monday, September 16th to Wednesday, September 18th at 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So you have 2 additional days.
So our next question is, someone has asked us to review the indirect calculation once again. To do that, I don't have the document up. So the way that the indirect calculation works is it's based upon a percentage of your direct expenses. Direct expenses include your personnel in the form of salaries and personnel in the form of any benefits that you offer to your employees, as well as all of the line items under the operations section of your budget. Things such as rent, office supplies, equipment, etc. So if the total of all of those line items is, for instance, $30,000, the maximum indirect amount that you can claim and have in your budget would be 10% of that, or $3,000. Our next question is, if you could please explain the media presentation. I think they were looking for specific information regarding the YouTube upload.
Okay, so the we're looking for a this is an innovative idea, and we're looking for a way of, without the actual provider being there necessarily, to show what your project is all about to the community, or highlight some elements of it. So, for example, if you're doing a Zumba class, you may want to show your class in action, for example, or a snippet of your class in action.
Shane, before we go on, so just to give a little bit more clarity about how you do that if you're unfamiliar with video creation or uploading to YouTube this afternoon, we will be uploading links to YouTube videos that explain to you how to upload a video to YouTube, how to turn a PowerPoint presentation into a video, how to turn other forms of presentations into videos, and then, how to upload to YouTube. So look for that to be included on our homepage by this afternoon. And if you have any additional questions about how to create a YouTube video, where to upload it, please feel free to send those questions in to Wiley, and we will include those in the printed FAQs that will be uploaded to the website following this webinar presentation.
Okay, so our next question is, how are awarded funds dispersed? At this time, we're not able to go into a full amount of detail regarding the disbursement of funds. However, as part of your contract, there will be a section that speaks to your financial reporting requirements and the method in which funds will be dispersed. In general, CHC has a history of providing funds in one of 2 ways. Under some circumstances, we are able to provide you with an advance of a portion of your total award. And in other instances, we have awarded funds on a reimbursement-only policy. We're not able to identify clearly at this point in time which direction we will be going in regard to the disbursement of funds, whether it's going to be an advance system or a reimbursement system. That is really dependent upon additional guidance that we are required to receive from the CDC as part of their approval of all of our awards. So that language will be included in your contract if you are an awarded proposal and project. The next question is, if equipment is needed to perform a service, can the money be dispersed to purchase that equipment prior to the start of the service? We are not able to disperse any funds in advance of your award or the date of your contract starting. However, what we do recommend that you do is if your program requires certain equipment to be purchased within your scope of work and the timing of all of your activities, we ask that you factor that amount of time in so that you actually have your equipment prior to the beginning of your class or whatever your program or activities are. That is upon yourself to develop and include in your own timeline. Generally speaking, if we are using an advanced system, that means that within 30 days of actual signing of a contract, you would either receive, one, your advance in the percentage or amount yet to be determined, or two, within 60 days of your award, if we were using a reimbursement system, that's approximately when you would receive your first reimbursement statement if we use the reimbursement method. So at the most, you're looking at either 30 days or 60 days from the time of contract to the time of payment and receiving your first payment. So please factor that into your scope of work and programming. So our next question is around, I guess there's some confusion perhaps somewhere in the RFP. It references two different numbers. The RFP references in one location, it looks like 4 contracts are going to be awarded. In another location, it references 8 contracts that are going to be awarded. So Wiley, can you please clarify?
Sure. Thank you for that question. It's going to be, we're targeting 8 total funded projects. And we're looking at 4 providers at each school. So we have 2 schools with 4 providers each. So we're looking to fund 8 total projects. And with an even split, ideally, with 4 physical activity and 4 nutrition providers funded overall. So we'd have 2 physical activity providers at Washington, for example, and 2 nutrition providers at Washington, and the same for Fremont.
Okay. So our next question is, what is the maximum award amount? Per contract, or rather per application, the maximum award amount is $35,000. Now, if you are submitting multiple applications, such as one application to do physical activity specifically at Washington High School, and then you're submitting a separate application for nutrition at Washington High School, each of those 2 contracts have a maximum award of $35,000 each.
And that includes the indirect cost as well.
Yes. So the $35,000 per award is not only for personnel and operations. The amount that you will be claiming in indirect costs, that 10% amount, must be within the total award of $35,000. So our next question is, do we prepare a separate scope of work if we are proposing, for instance, nutrition at both schools? So would there be a separate scope of work for each school?
No, you will not need a separate scope of work.
Our next question is, can you submit separate proposals for nutrition at Fremont and then a separate one for Washington? So do you have to submit two different applications if it's the same program just at different schools?
No, this is a point I want to make very clear. If you're applying within the same category, let's say nutrition, you can use one application for both schools. We want to make this process as efficient for you as possible. However, if you want to apply for a nutrition and a physical activity grant, then you would need two separate proposals or separate proposals for each school. Okay, I just hope that's clear. If you want to apply for physical activity and you say, well, I want to be considered for both Washington and Fremont, you would just only need to complete one application.
So, and then it looks like there was a follow-up to that, which would be, if so, what is the maximum request for each proposal? Once again, the maximum request for each proposal that you submit is $35,000.
So just to follow up, let's say you want nutrition and you want to use one application for both Washington and Fremont, and it's an outstanding application and we want it in both places, you would get a total, and you apply for $35,000 on the nose, you would get a total of $70,000 for your project.
So the next question that we have is, do we have to get a signature from the school on the license application as part of the proposal submission? No. Again, you're not submitting that LAUSD paperwork directly to LAUSD. We will be providing that to LAUSD on your behalf, and therefore you are not required to obtain a school signature on that form prior to your application submission. That is a post-award activity, and we will be responsible for obtaining that necessary signature. The next question has to do with insurance. And we understand that there is an insurance requirement. However, the question is, do we have to meet that insurance requirement at the time of the proposal, or is that something that can be done after the proposal? The insurance requirement under this RFP is required within 30 days of the award of your contract. So from the day that we notify you that you will be receiving an award, you have 30 days to provide us with documentation or evidence of your insurance. Our next question has to do with a 501c3 designation. If you have applied for but not yet received approval of your nonprofit designation under IRS Code 501c3, we would ask that you provide us as part of your proposal documentation that supports or evidence of your submission for approval. Generally speaking, when you submit that information to the appropriate entity, they provide you with a control number, and most often they provide you with a letter saying, we have received your application, please allow us X amount of time to review it. So that letter would be sufficient. The next question that we have is, can applicants submit more than one proposal?
Yes, the applicant may submit more than one proposal. However, it may not be necessary. If you're only applying to do physical activity, you don't need to submit more than one proposal. You can identify or select that you want your proposal considered for both schools. If you're applying for physical activity and nutrition, then you would need to submit 2 separate proposals for each school. So that means that you would need to submit 2 proposals, one for physical activity, one for nutrition, and you just have to decide which schools you want your proposals to be considered for. So you may want both of those proposals considered for both schools. You may want both of those proposals considered for each separate school. So that would be your choice or your call.
So then the follow-up to that would be, if so, can they be funded for more than one proposal?
Yes, they could be. We'll look at the quality of your application, and so you could potentially, if you have really outstanding ideas, I guess, get funded for physical activity at 2 schools and funded for nutrition at 2 schools.
So the next question is the application for Fremont and Washington high schools only?
Yes. At this time, this is for the first round of funding. It is targeting those 2 schools, Washington and Fremont. Again, this is the first round. We have 6 other schools that we're looking to add providers to. If you have a strong application and it does not get funded in this round, and we feel that it would make a great application at another school, we will notify you of that, and if there needs to be some modifications to your proposal, we will let you know as well. So we encourage you to apply in this round.
Our next question is if you could please repeat the new due date.
Okay. The new due date is September 18th, which is Wednesday, September 18th at 11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Late or incomplete submissions will be disqualified. Our next question so this has to do with the statement regarding new programs. The question is, can funding be used for the expansion of currently existing programs, or must it be completely new programs? And can you please clarify, by the use of new, are you discussing new at the school site or new unique to the entire school system?
Okay, good question. The first part of the question is no, the funding cannot be used to expand a current program. Okay, so hopefully that's clear. No, it cannot be used to expand a current program. What does the term new mean? New means that it's new to the school. Again, if you are doing a program at Dorsey High School and it's going extremely well and you want to apply for Crenshaw High School, then and Crenshaw doesn't have your program, you don't have the same program at Crenshaw, that would be considered a new program. So it doesn't have to be new to the whole LAUSD. It doesn't even have to be new to your organization. It would just have to be new to the school for which you're applying to.
So our next question is, do both schools have kitchens that can be used for cooking classes, or would we need to purchase equipment to run those classes?
We'll have to let you know that at a later time. Both schools do have kitchens, but we're trying to figure out whether or not you can actually use those kitchens for your cooking class. So if you have the ability to, bring in equipment, please indicate that in your proposal, and then we'll let you know.
In addition to that, I would just like to also offer, for the purposes of budgeting, because we don't have a definitive answer at this point, and I'm not quite certain if we will have a definitive answer prior to the submission deadline for the RFP, it might behoove you to include or factor in the cost of either space and or equipment around that type of activity in your proposal. Understanding, however, that if at a later time it is determined that you can use the school's kitchen and equipment, we will, and your proposal is awarded, we will work with you through the contract negotiation period to revise your budget based upon that new information. So it looks like we have time for maybe one or two more questions. How long is the contract duration in months?
That's a good question. It's approximately 12 months, because I think it's based on semesters. So semesters run about 4 months, and so we're looking at 3 semesters, so it's approximately 12 months.
So it is 3 consecutive school calendar semesters from the fall of 2013 to the fall of 2014. And please remember that in your calculation of that time, you need to exclude the summer session. You may not use any funding under this RFP for programming during the summer session. And it looks like we have time for maybe one more question. So this has to do with the statement in regard to a substantial portion of the scope of work activities. The question is, if an organization is operating and managing, as an example, a community garden, and they partner with another entity for whom they would be paying to provide nutrition and cooking classes, is that allowable, or would that be a pass-through grant? The answer is not as easy or clear given that example, but I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability. If your proposal is to do nutrition and cooking classes, and that is the limit of the scope of activities that you are proposing, however, in order to do the cooking and nutrition classes, you need to contract someone else to actually perform those classes. That would, by definition, mean that a substantial portion of the activities are not being conducted by the lead organization, and therefore would be disqualified from receiving funding. Understand, whatever your proposed activities within your proposal are, you as the lead applicant must perform at minimum 50% of those activities, so that you're not acting as a conduit of funding for another entity. In addition to that, you may not act as a conduit or a fiscal agent for another entity. If the primary focus of your organization in the context of your application is merely to receive the funds from CHC, only to turn around and give the funds to another agency or entity, that would disqualify you from receiving the funding. So there are a number of questions that we were not able to get to within the time allotted. However, please understand that we do have all of the questions that were submitted recorded, and we will be providing a written response, including the answers that we provided during this call, in a written statement that will be emailed to everyone who registered for this. And it will also be posted on the website. Additionally, a replay of this webinar will be available on our website as well for anyone who would like to review it one more time or who was not able to join us on the call today. If you have any further questions that you were not able to submit, but that come up in the course of preparing your proposal, we do ask that you submit those questions in writing using the information on your screen at this point in time. So you will email those questions to wiley@chc-inc.org, and we will do our best to provide you with a prompt response. And with that, this concludes the Partners in Health Reach Demonstration Project Nutrition and Physical Activities Request for Proposals. Thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon. This concludes this call.